glasses swapping for this. I'm just in that eye phase, so don't mind me. Anyhow, welcome everyone. This is a topic near and dear to myself, and I'm sure a lot of you as well. It's very deep rooted in this community, and it affects a lot of people, and it's not always that well represented. And I'm going to get into in just a second here why I chose to kind of pivot from my usual lectures, which are more along the lines of remote viewing and the mind, the mysteries of the mind, which I absolutely love. But really, this is how they're interfacing with us anyhow. So these two topics really do intersect beautifully. So I have to get my glasses on here. Hold on a sec, let me just fix this. Okay. So let's get going here. I've got a lot of information. So why abductions? A lot of people don't know I was working on a TV series producing for a couple of years. I was the only person who was sort of from our UFO background. And they wanted someone with a psychological background as well. So I was doing the casting, and the one thing I said to them before accepting was that I wanted to be able to use people of any age because it was really important to me, and I saw that a lot of other shows were kind of leaving out certain demographics that were older, you know, and so I didn't want that limit, and they agreed. So it's sad that the show didn't happen, but of course this happens. This is part of that industry. I'm not from that industry, but I was just there for a couple of years. And when I guess I'll tell you the next part in a second. But I did end up having in my own research that I did for this for 2 years, some older adults who had really incredible stories. They're not the typical gray stories that we're used to. They're definitely outliers even within the abduction phenomenon. So I really, you'll see why, I really want to tell their stories. I said it was going to be 3 abductions, but it's actually going to be 2 because I have too much detail. I couldn't possibly fit a third one in there, but you'll see why. They all have multiple stories. So yeah, these are not your typical cases. And the psychological effects, I find we don't talk about it that much as well. The unspoken trauma, rejection, loneliness, and how these people are coping. So I'm presenting these as case studies, so they are pretty detailed. This was really the catalyst of why I did this pivot. I saw this snippet after the Arrow report came out, basically saying all of this was bunk, right? And I saw this interview with Matt Ford, The Good Trouble Show, and it was Robert Jacobs, who was in Bob Hastings' book, UFOs and Nukes. He was a UFO witness from the 60s at Big Sur. He worked for, oh my gosh, I just lost it. Yes, Vandenberg. And his is not an abduction, but what happened was, this just really hit me. So he was interviewed for the Arrow report, and he was so excited. He said he'd been waiting 50 years for someone to, you know, take him seriously. And he believed them, that they were, you know, they were listening. And when the Arrow report came out, he felt so betrayed. So this interview's online, him talking about it. I told the American people what happened because it was the most profound thing that ever happened in my life. And I was just thinking about this research that I was sitting on. So there's all of these people out there who have incredible stories, whether they're sightings or encounters or abductions. So I feel their stories need to be heard. There's a whole generation that I'm particularly worried about that we're going to lose soon. You know, they're not going to be here. And they have incredibly important stories They're a part of our human collective history, and they need to be recorded and they need to be heard. So I thought I'm going to dust off these files, and I want to share these stories on their behalf. So I can thank Bob Jacobs and the Arrow Report for pushing me out here. So my first story, this gentleman's story has never been heard before. If for anyone who's a member of our website, Richard Dolan members, you might have heard us do an off-the-cuff about this, but we used a pseudonym, but he has decided as of right now that he is going to just go by his first name, which is Bill. His is called A Path Well Traveled, and it's quite a unique case. So here's a little bit of background about Bill. He was born in 1950. He's 74 years old. He was adopted. His mother was adopted also. That might not seem relevant to you, but in an unusually high amount of my cases, there are adoptions or multiple adoptions in the family. So it's just something I'm tracking. It's an unusual pattern. This occurred in a suburb of New York. He's a husband, father, grandfather, was a Marine, served in Japan, 1969. He worked in commercial aircraft maintenance for his whole life. He's a baseball guy. He's now retired. Humble man, down to earth. I loved talking to him. I had Richard meet him as well. But they were a really wonderful family, and we spoke to, well, Richard was present for some, but I spoke to a lot of people about him. So this was Bill, his wife, his daughter, his brother, his niece and nephew. I mean, doing a 360 here to get the background on him. So both of my cases have no hypnosis. These are all conscious memories. This, Bill has been sitting on this his whole life, and he was still a little bit shy about it coming out. He's not comfortable going to support groups. He doesn't feel comfortable traveling, but it's eating him up. You know, it's eating him up. And now he's in his 70s, and he, you know, these people are thinking about their mortality. We all do, but there's a part of him that feels like it's time. So as far as his childhood, he was a pretty normal child. Blended family. He had several brothers and sisters, kind of like Brady Bunch style, and he loved to build model airplanes. He loved to read, played lots of sports. He was very involved. And so let's get into his unique story. So at around the age of 5, Billy, at the time Billy, and his family moved into a brand new home in a new area, and this was actually in Longwood, New York. So approximately 8 months after moving in the middle of the night, while everybody was asleep, young Billy wakes up completely and began hearing this woman's voice in his head to come outside while everybody was sleeping. It was just this very simple, Billy, come out. Billy, come out. We need you. He was very clear. This was a we need you. And so there had to be some manipulation going on, because he just got up in the total darkness as a 5-year-old, goes out of his room, walks out of the door, out of the bedroom door, down the dark stairs, through the dark house, out the front door, across the street, in between two houses, into a field where there is just a pump house, a tiny pump house with one single light. And the house that was looking onto it there were never any people home. So it was very dark. And he's 5 when this started. So it happened to be a large pansy field back there. There was a single light lighting up this house. And every time he would go, he would meet this man and woman, this very tall, slender man and woman who never spoke a word to him, only in his mind. And she would welcome him, put her arm around him. He would open the door to the tiny pump house, which was all black inside, She and little Billy would walk in, he would walk behind them, next thing he wakes up in his bed. Okay? So I'm sure you're thinking, were they human? Were they this? We're going to kind of go over a lot of the interesting things about these people that make us kind of suspicious. So, let's see what's up there. Okay, so this husband and wife, he described them as very good looking, very tall, and very slender. And by the way, I was going to get into this later, but I'll tell you now, this happened over the course of a decade. So from 5 years old.